another thing that I have struggled with so very much. Just damn. Hello guys, welcome, or if you've already seen my channel before, welcome back. I'm the Philadelphia Whovian, and you guys know at this point that, by God, there's a subject that I'm going to walk towards, despite the possibilities it's going to lead to me getting some very interesting responses, or me being like, what the heck is wrong with her? Your reaction to me, that is. But here we go down that road again. And it is time war, no time war. That is the question. Basically speaking, my ongoing complex and confusing feelings to certain things, whether do I love them, do I hate them, do I have a mixture of both feelings? In this case, I do, and it's the concept of Doctor Who and the Time War that happened at the beginning of the series of New Who. This is the groundwork, the foundation of New Who. Is the Doctor has started off very different than his classic self, where he is starting off with a fresh of losing his entire planet, where he had to destroy it in order to save the universe, making that hard decision. Now, question is, the Time War is something that has been, Russell T Davies has been praised for, and it's mostly seemed to be a universally loved concept. Me, I have my mixed feelings about it. There are things about it I love. There are things about the Time War I absolutely despise and hate. I'm not going to lie. But first thing is first, must be very honest. Okay, some people have given such incredible credit to Russell T Davies for creating the idea of the Time War. What a cool idea. While I do give him credit for the notion of it, I can't give him credit for the creation of the idea. It turns out the Time War is really... This is not Russell T Davies being original. The idea of the Time War, of a whole planet being wiped out and someone being the last of their kind, as I said before, that happened to Nyssa in the 5th Doctor's era, or the end of the 4th Doctor's era, I should say. So we have a character on the TARDIS in Classic Who was wiped, her whole species was wiped out, and she was the last of her kind, and she has to deal with these sentiments and these feelings. Yes, but it turns out in the audio, in the prose of the 8th Doctor's era, there is something else also, where the 8th Doctor ends up wiping out his entire planet also of Gallifrey. And this was pointed out to me, and I cannot remember the name of this story right now, but I definitely remember reading up on it. I was like, oh yeah. This already was used. The idea of the Time War was what Russell T Davies does sometimes, which he took another writer's or another creator's idea and he ran with it himself, but he didn't ultimately originate or create it himself. I give him credit for using it, but I cannot give him credit for creating it. I just give him credit for thinking it's a good idea for a foundation for a new, branch of Doctor Who. And also, I don't give him credit for being the creator of it, as I don't give him credit. And this is something I run into with RTD fans very often. I'm saying again, sorry for being redundant for you guys that have seen my videos before. Yes, I am saying it again. But with Russell T Davies, I can never give him credit for things he did not technically come up with himself. I only give credit to stories fully, or writers fully, when they take an idea that's happened before and they make it better. They find ways to improve on it. With Russell, more often than not, when he takes ideas from classic Doctor Who or from the 8th Doctor's era, they aren't always as good as the initial thing he took from. Sometimes he takes from a story and he does not build on it enough to make me say, oh, that is better than what you initially came from. It's either as good or not as good, and that's not me knocking Russell. I'm just trying to explain to you guys now why with Russell I don't give him credit for ideas he did not initially have if he did not improve on those ideas. And sometimes he did improve on them, but most of the time he recycled it, and it wasn't to me always as good as what he recycled of its own origins. So I'm not going to give him credit for ideas he did not have. So for those people saying, oh, Russell's a genius for the Time War, I can't fully say he is. He's clever for taking this idea that was already around and using it to his advantage, but I cannot give him credit for creating that, because he did not fully create that. He got inspiration from it and used it again. So, there's that. I covered myself. Covered my bases. Okay. Now the Time War. Here's my ongoing mixed feelings about the Time War. Okay. Now the positive side is the Time War gave the Doctor going into this series of New Who, going into New Who, such a unique take on what the Doctor is or what he's going through. Not just reviving it and just doing the same old thing. No, reviving it and therefore giving a change. Putting your stamp. This is a new take on or of an old cool idea. And it led to some very interesting concepts of the Doctor being the last of his kind, having to deal with it, having to struggle with that. So it led to some very interesting dilemmas. On the other hand, this led to the Doctor sometimes being quite depressing. It's on the bad side. Also, this led to the Doctor sometimes being an emotional cripple. And sometimes it seemed like the Time War was used as an excuse to take the Doctor's initial character, rip it up, and just completely change his entire character and build it up to be something else that, yes, is going to appeal to pop culture, but it's kind of maybe potentially a robbing or a raping of his initial character. Before the Time War happened, the Doctor was a very emotionally independent person who was also pluralistic and could travel with companion to companion. He was very good at moving on to things. Post-Time War, we get a Doctor who therefore is suffering from post-traumatic shock and is shell-shocked. As a result, he is very singular now. He is clinging to one person and using them as their ideal, but he's to the point where he's using them as a crutch, where he builds himself and wraps himself around that person, and he wraps his identity around them more so, to the point where when he regenerates, he becomes a younger version of what he once was to appeal to that younger individual he is now traveling with. He is basing so much of who he is on that person. Now, it's always a nice thing to get influence and become a better person, because you are inspired by somebody else, but this leads to dangerous situations. As I said before in previous videos, this externalizes the Doctor's goodness or his moral strength, where he has to rely upon others to build up himself or to build up his own self, as opposed to relying upon himself as much or more than relying upon somebody else. It's best for the Doctor to always have an emotional stability to himself. If not, he's constantly relying upon someone else or an external force to solidify or to explain or therefore create his goodness, rather than his goodness being initiated within himself as much as it should be. I do not think this is a very good thing. I think it led to the Doctor being so reliant upon his companions, it led to him being what the seventh Doctor labeled an emotional cripple. Which is why, again, I lean more towards the 11th Doctor, because he says in The Vampires in Venice, you mourn and then you live. Bringing to my next concept of the idea of the Time War constantly was leading to the Doctor, instead of doing what he did before Time War in Classic Who, which he was always looking forward, now we have the Doctor constantly looking back. The idea of the Time War is something looming over his shoulders, but also leads to the Doctor being very cyclical in his nature. I mentioned that in my 10th Doctor video of the cyclical manner of his behavior. Now, we humans, by our very nature, like circles. It's one of our favorite shapes. It's something we associate with very often. But with the Doctor being very cyclical, and since he's constantly looking back over his shoulder and thinking of the tragedy of the Time War, he never gets past it when it comes to especially the Russell T Davies era. Rather, it's constantly weighing him down, and this influences his actions to the point where it even influences his behavior, where the Doctor begins to despise change, rather than accepting it the way he used to. We have a Doctor who literally is clinging to Rose to the point where he can't have any bonds. Okay, Mickey, no, he doesn't care about Mickey very much. Adam, no. And Captain Jack. Once these men are showing any ounce of imperfection, the Doctor rejects them in very cold, sometimes even cruel ways. Then he loses Rose, and what happens? He meets Martha. He shows up at her party like a stalker, and then immediately acts like she's the one who's intruding on his space. He's the one who wanted her to go with him. Now he's saying, not that you're replacing Rose. One trip and you go back, just say thanks. He's the one who sought her out, but now he's acting like she is the one who is burdening him with her company for not living up to Rose, though he's the one who keeps on actively seeking her out. Why? Because he's still thinking on the past. He's still looking back on Rose as the source of his goodness, even though he wasn't always very good under her. And not only that, even though You could argue sometimes some of his worst mannerisms or behavior could have been in the name of Rose or under Rose, because now he is a man who can't function as well on his own, but needs to constantly feel like he's relying upon somebody else to make him better. That's not improvement. That is regression of character as opposed to progression. And it's the Doctor still leaning back and remembering Rose instead of going forward with Martha. He is still turning around and looking back. The Doctor is cyclical in nature. He's constantly looking back instead of looking forward, not being linear, but cyclical in his behavior and his attitude towards things. This idea of fearing change, of actively fearing change, and looking back instead of looking forward is a contagious notion. A contagious notion, because a lot of us humans are cyclical in that way, where we look back instead of looking forward. We look back on the good old days and looking forward to the better days that could happen if we just let go of the good old days. The Doctor clings to those good old days. He is constantly chasing after those good old days. He's very much like the Great Gatsby, where he is looking at Daisy as this memory that he just has to eventually go back to, and he has to win, and he has to defeat, conquer. And she is the epitome of all of his dreams. And he believes in that green light. He's so close, he could often taste it. He's almost close to getting her. But he doesn't. And that chase led to his undoing. It's the same with the Doctor. He's constantly leaning back and looking to the past, trying to chase happiness where he can get it. But it was long gone. It's already ran past him. It's already gone now. He needs to move forward. But he's still leaning back. And you think, oh, well, he got Rose by the end, so it's all good. It's that, oh, God, journey's end. But look where he's at. He dies alone, but also, he says, what's his last line? I don't want to go. With his last breath, he is fearing change again. And he's missing the entire point of what it means to regenerate again. I mean, not again. Now he is. What did the Time Lord make the Doctor, possibly, but stripping him down or cutting his character in half and taking some of the best parts away from him? Yes, it appeals to a mainstream audience, but does it appeal to the true nature of what he once was? Did he ever fully get back to that? Or was he constantly trying to chase after something he could not fully grasp? Because he was always looking back as opposed to looking forward. He was mourning, constantly mourning, instead of just living. It's hard to tell. It's really hard to tell what the Time War does. But also, again, before the Time War, the Doctor was very good at solving problems. Very good at, figuring things out on his own, piecing things and saving the day. Sometimes his companions definitely helped him. Sometimes they saved the day themselves, but he was very good at saving the day. What I saw with the Doctor is post-Time War, a Doctor who could not always overpower the very monsters or outthink or outwit the very monsters he used to be able to outthink and outwit. Now he needs his companion to come in and conveniently get possessed and become a bad wolf to save the day, where he once usually had the mental powers to defeat the Daleks. Now I see that the Doctor needs his companion to walk around a planet and constantly save the day almost every episode, because he just is boggled down by all this baggage. Baggage can make you interesting, but is baggage what the Doctor is constantly, is baggage what he fully is? The Time War. I see the compelling aspect of it, but sometimes I can't help but wonder, was the Time War an excuse to completely strip the Doctor of much of what he was to make him into something else that was not what he was, and using perfect justification for it? Either way, the Time War, cool idea, but I will always be wondering about this. And it happened, so we can't change the Time War happened. We can't. But I think the Time War led to some very positive and cool things about Doctor Who when it comes to New Who, but I also admit that the Time War was an excuse to possibly lead to things I'm just not that crazy about myself at the same time. I don't know. I'm curious to see what you guys think. I know some of you are going to think this is a very foolish video, but hey, at least it got you thinking about it. And what do you think of the Time War? What do you think is do you think there's positive and negative aspects to it? Only positive aspects to it, or negative aspects to it? Do you think it's fully awesome? Do you think it was an atrocious idea, or do you think maybe it's a combination of both of those things? Maybe it has its awesome sides and its not so awesome aspects to it, like I feel. Either way, guys, I am very interested to know what you guys think. The Time War, bad idea, or was it a good idea? Time War or no Time War? That is the question of, was it a good idea or was it not so? Guys, thank you so very much for watching my channel. You guys were awesome. So awesome. Peace out, guys.